In cybersecurity, change is the only constant. What used to be a world of firewalls and passcodes has turned into a battleground of automation, AI, and human psychology, where every new tool that speeds us up also opens another door for risk. Today, I'm joined by Sean Colicchio, Chief Information Security Officer at Pellera, and Ryan Patrick from HITRUST, to talk about how this landscape is constantly shifting. How cybersecurity is no longer just about locking things down. It's about building trust, resilience, and confidence in the systems we rely on every day. From the mindset shift that's helping security teams become business enablers to the risks that come when we put too much faith in automation. This episode digs into what it really takes to stay secure when the rules keep changing. Welcome, Ryan and Sean. To kick us off, could each of you just share a little bit about your background and how you came into your current roles?
So my background is heavily in the military. So I spent about 20 years in the United States Army doing a whole bunch of different things, being super cool, riding around on tanks, to being an IT guy and a cyber guy. In my current role, I, in a previous life, ran a high trust practice at a professional services firm. So I became intimately familiar with the high trust framework, the assurance methodology, and I also built relationships with high trust in general.
I'm Sean Colicchio. I'm the CISO of Pellera Technologies. So I cut my teeth years ago in IT deploying point of sale systems, believe it or not, for restaurants. I worked through a technical track in my career to start a server administration function, eventually moving into disaster recovery and backups administration in the early 2000s, and then started a risk and security firm. I also teach a little bit at a local university, a psychology course that's cross-listed with cybersecurity.
I'm really curious. The landscape seems to be changing almost daily. What excites the two of you about where cybersecurity and compliance are headed at the moment?
I think cybersecurity is somewhat at a crossroads. So historically, it was seen as a cost center for most organizations, and there's still some of that today. But I do see that more and more CISOs like Sean have harnessed their skills and sharpened their skills to be more business enablers and actually align with business objectives, and to a certain degree, sometimes be revenue generating. So I feel that's really exciting, is to see cybersecurity becoming more prominent within the larger picture of why there is cybersecurity.
It's a great point, Ryan. I think that business enablement mentality is something that I think professionals like us have tried to get into the business conversations for years. And we've historically been sidelined as the technical thought leaders or subject matter experts, and not allowed at the big kids table, allowed to be able to weigh in on decisions, because the industry legacy mythos is we are the office of no, right? Security doesn't want you to innovate, doesn't want you to do anything. But the reality is, I think to your point, not only has that opportunity opened up for organizations to allow somebody that is a technical expert to have an opinion on these things, but also the right technical expert also has the wherewithal to back up and say, this is just my recommendation.
Sean, it may have been you describing how cybersecurity provides, it's like the brakes on a car, right? The difference between a dragster and an F1 are the brakes and the steering, right? And cybersecurity, you can go really fast, but if you don't have the control to make those corners, you're out of the race. And so cybersecurity can be that accelerator that will allow the business to go fast and move quickly and safely. Whereas in the absence of those guardrails, without absence of the brakes to make the turns, things can be a disaster.
Yeah. And I think that analogy is very similar to frameworks we see in the space, right? Compliance or security frameworks, where in order for a race to be successful and somebody doesn't get in a crash every single race, they need rules. They need a checkered flag. What does a checkered flag mean? There's a definition at the beginning just like there's a definition in a policy at the beginning of a policy, right? Ryan, is there a parallel that you see with the way HITRUST approaches compliance frameworks and how that is constantly potentially being enriched? Is there something that HITRUST does differently there?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about the analogy and the alternative, if there were not guidelines on how to build a car, there were not guidelines on how the race was going to be conducted, everybody be making up their own rules. And depending on their skills, expertise, or experience, it could be fine or it could not be fine. And I see that happening throughout the standards, regulation, or framework space, right? If you look at some of the top frameworks, they're all very decentralized. It is up to, in most cases, the audit firm or the professional services firm to, one, interpret what the controls actually are trying to drive at. But two, what's the appropriate testing and validation models and sampling? And then three, it leaves the interpretation on what is the proper control selection. Do those controls actually matter? Or is it just your opinion? And I'm not going to sit here and tell the listeners that their opinion doesn't matter, but I have a really strong belief that we should be utilizing what malicious actors are doing as our indicators on what's important. We are being guided by the malicious actors through the ingestion of threat intelligence on a monthly basis. We have a really lengthy handbook of exactly what the expectations are for, we call them external assessors, think about audit firms or professional service firms, exactly how they will conduct those assessments. And all that's internally for the external assessor, and then it's submitted to us. And we run automation against it. To me, that's our biggest differentiator is our assurance model, inclusive of quality assurance on top of it, and the fact that our control selection is relevant and it's recent because we're looking at threat data on a monthly basis and making adjustments as we deem necessary based on the threat data to ensure that assessments from that point forward are protecting against the threats that are happening today.
What I'm hearing is HITRUST is setting the framework for the race based on the threat actors, right? It's not based on the organization. It's based on what the enemy is doing.
If you look at NASCAR, right? NASCAR, in the beginning, they got a bunch of people together and they said, here are the rules of the road on how we're going to conduct these races. But after years and years of safety issues, crashes, technology advancements, so on and so forth, they've updated the rules to better protect drivers, better protect cars, make the race more exciting, all of the things that you would expect. That's ultimately what we're doing is we build the foundational controls, but then we're letting the safety violations or the crashes tell us how we need to adjust based on what we originally designed.
Can you share some examples where new threat intel has directly shaped updates that you've made at HITRUST or different processes or priorities?
So when we first started this 3 years ago, it became clear that our knowledge, our skills, our experience still had some gaps in it. But what we found was there was two controls when we first started doing this that didn't protect against one of the most pervasive issues that we're seeing in the threat landscape. It revolves around phishing. So we didn't have a control that basically said you need to use an email filtering solution that blocks suspicious emails and or attachments before it reaches an inbox. Seems like a no-brainer, right? Why wouldn't we have that in our control set? The other one is all about reviewing permissions and privileged users and how the access control and the permissioning will protect against phishing. And when I reviewed this with our standards team, the folks that are doing this type of analysis, I'm like, how did we miss this? Like, this seems so basic. We can't do it without the bad guys and gals telling us what's important.
Sean, you've worked with, probably hundreds of organizations at this point. What risks do you see showing up again and again that organizations often miss? Especially if they aren't using a threat intel driven approach?
Yeah, I mean, you can't protect what you can't see, right? So that's first off, right? I think one of the things that's constant is it doesn't matter what the new shiny object is that delivers phishing as an outcome for an attacker, whether that's QR code attacks a few years back that emerged and was novel, or AI-driven threats and accelerated threats now, or sophistication in grammar as an easy example, right? It used to be the red flag as a grammatical error. Well, now the red flag is perfect grammar in a phishing attack, right? To an extent. So I think we separate all of that shiny object stuff and we realize that that will always come. Every quarter, every year, there will be a new technology that is somehow manipulated. I mean, the term hacking, I never use it ever if I can help it, but its definition is really just working around the standard way to get from point A to point B. It doesn't necessarily mean it's malicious or breaking things or whatever. So that's the path of least resistance. These attackers will always follow that. So as a CISO and as an actual user myself, it's very important to cut through all that technology and get right to the psychological principle, to the fundamentals. It's irrelevant if there's a deep fake phishing email that looks just like your colleague. Would you ever have gotten an email from that email source? Is the action that it's asking you to do, does it make you feel that spidey sense that means something's uneasy? Getting the psychological principle of why these things work, why they are constantly working from an attacker's perspective, helps us tap into that spidey sense that is instinctual.
Have you seen any recent innovations that have been game changers in resiliency, in compliance?
There's a ton of tools out there that can facilitate tabletop exercises or stress test resiliency, maybe simulations that you can do. I'm not super familiar with any of those. What I think we need to do is just, like I said, get back to the basics and do the hard work.
A lot of people have a plan. The old adage is you have a plan until you get punched in the face, right? The key, I think, is testing the actual recovery function, right? You may have bought a tool off the shelf that promises immutability in the 3-2-1 rule from a technology perspective, but technology doesn't fix a broken process. And if you have never tested recovering a workload, one small bite of the apple might be pick one of your core critical apps, one of 7 or 10 or whatever it is.
I agree with you. The compliance automation thing it's crazy to think about. Same thing with AI and agentic AI. Like, there has to be hard work put in. There has to be people working the issue alongside using the tool as opposed to deferring to the tool.
It's not magic, right? AI isn't magic. It is an accelerator. It is powerful, but you need a skilled practitioner behind it. If you're not a skilled practitioner, you're just looking at a stream of God knows what and don't know how to act on it.
Absolutely. And right now, I mean, I've on my own use of AI have found tons of times where it's hallucinated. And Sean, going back to the psychology of things, people trust AI. They trust whatever the output of that model is as fact. Like, if you look at ChatGPT, it says, verify the output of this information. It's a workflow tool. It's a way of streamlining manual processes. It should not replace people in critical thinking.
What I love about this part of the conversation is how it strips everything back to the fundamentals. Sean and Ryan are reminding us that the real power of cybersecurity lies in readiness. Knowing your assets, testing your recovery plan, building muscle memory for when, not if, a breach happens. Because no matter how much automation or AI we throw at these problems, resilience still comes down to the humans behind the screens, especially on the teams willing to do the heavy lifting and stay curious when the system says everything's fine. So let's take that same mindset and apply it to compliance, automation, and AI, and explore why the easiest solution isn't always the most secure one. You know, the challenge in front of us is that for a skilled practitioner, right, for a skilled developer, this is extremely powerful to be able to deploy a solution. If you are a cybersecurity professional with 10 years of experience in the trenches, it's powerful for you to be able to use it, and it speeds up what you do. I think the challenge really is what about the fresh graduate that's all excited to get their first job? How are they going to get the experience that someone who's been in the trenches has for 10 years in the absence of being able to be in the trenches? If the trenches are now replaced with those instincts, your spidey sense, they don't have that, the formative experience to develop the cybersecurity spidey sense, so to speak, right?
You're tiptoeing around something that I wish I could fix, but we need to build, what's the term I should use? Cybersecurity knowledge, intelligence into not only higher education, but into elementary education. Just like we teach math for years, just like we teach science and languages and even physical education, we should be doing this with cybersecurity as well, because kids these days are only going to know cyber stuff. They're only going to know web-based tools, and that's how their social interactions are happening now. So if they don't understand the dangers and they don't get that experience in their formative years.
100%. I couldn't agree more. And I mean, look at search engine use. I remember being in grade school and the teacher kind of educating everybody in the class on what a search engine is. And at that time, early on, much like these AI tools had that caveat added later about scrutinizing the output with ethical integrity, and it's your professional responsibility to use this in whatever way. That was added later, right? At first, that was not in place. So we saw the same thing with Google and other search engines, where immediately people saw, okay, I have immediate access to answers. I think that was a very temporary time period. And we still see people that rely on search results too much, right? But I think that's a great analogy of it was highly disruptive, immediately exciting, and then eventually we start to realize what limits might be introduced.
Yeah, and we're definitely not there yet with AI. IBM released a report. I don't remember the exact, I think it was released this year for 2024. It said something like there's a 13% breach rate in AI systems. Of that 13%, and that's, as we adopt more, that rate is going to go way higher. And as malicious actors figure out ways to manipulate and exploit AI, that number is going to skyrocket because it's so pervasive. But of that 13%, 97% of those breaches were due to a lack of access control. Access control is like one of the most fundamental security principles around for any system. If you look at the landscape today, most people are compliance focused, right? Financial services, healthcare, critical infrastructure, they all have regulations. So they're all focused on satisfying that regulation at the start. I need to satisfy the government. What I would argue, and it's super easy for me to say in my seat because I'm not those people, is if you focus on sound security and put that at the foundation, compliance is a byproduct.
I'm curious, where do you see the biggest cybersecurity challenges emerging from as we go forward?
AI, without a doubt, both from a malicious actor utilizing AI to people buying security AI-enabled tools and not configuring them or just assuming that they're going to work appropriately, all the way to the models and the tools themselves not being hardened. I am equally amazed and in awe of AI and terrified of AI because it is somewhat the Wild West. And it originally was equating it to cloud adoption when everybody was moving to the cloud. And I thought AI would be the same way. There'd be hesitation, but I'm not seeing that anymore. Like, people are all in. This concept of shadow AI is very, very real. And it's a big problem for organizations when you think about protecting sensitive information or IP or financials. So that, to me, is the biggest concern. Something I'm talking about all the time is we have to get our arms wrapped around this AI thing.
I'm a little bit more naive. I'm not a security professional necessarily, right? But it makes it very easy to build and deploy something, right? Which means that creating something new for your organization that can be of value can happen really quick, which typically means that you haven't had a good security assessment done of it. right? Everybody thinks they see the ROI, and so there's a push to adopt before, like you said, leading with security. The different tools will generate code for you. Well, an entire code base in under 10 minutes. But nobody's thought about how secure that application is.
Right. I talk to a lot of organizations around the idea of third-party risk management, and it's not uncommon for a TPRM leader to say to me, 60% of my vendors have AI in the products and services that they've sold to me. Like, how do I wrap my arms around that? It's already there. It's already in my environment. It's already being used. So to me, that's a part of the problem, is that we just need to get started.
Yeah, and just to add to that, right, I think this is not going away. So I think it becomes accelerated with AI because now people can write Python applications, as you said, Jonathan, among other things, right? So there's that piece that I think is very problematic. There's also the blind trust that AI will solve the problems AI introduced, that eventually there will be an AI superweapon and it will identify every deep fake and it will stop quantum threats and all these things. The reality is the same people building the attack platforms are similarly experienced as these people building defensive platforms. So it will be a very quick arms race. And to your point, not just shifting left to the point of being involved in the architecture, but let's think of the life cycle of shadow IT or shadow AI. It's somebody has a business need, they figure out they can do it. Manager maybe blesses it, maybe not. So that's 5 or 6 steps. And then sometimes there's sanctioned skunkworks projects. And now you've got potentially weeks or months of that time for a security expert like myself to uncover this shadow effort. And then we see it hit production, and that's when we see real technical risk. So we've now shortened that, let's call it shadow AI dwell time of basically the only opportunity for somebody like me or a security expert to uncover this shadow activity to a mere matter of minutes or hours instead of months. So I think that is another piece of the puzzle, is the observation window to detect these shadow efforts is so short now that you almost have to be proactive.
I guess I would offer to that same point, and I talk about this for TPRM, but I think it applies just generally with AI, is we don't need to recreate the wheel to overcome this. Like, we've already tackled this problem. Let's learn from what we've done in the past, write a policy that tells the organization this is what acceptable use of AI looks like. Publish a list of approved AI platforms that the organization has purchased for the employees. Educate the employees on the dangers, if you will, or the concerns or challenges with AI. Like, just use what you have and just get started.
It sounds like there's no magic bullet. There's still a lot of work. It comes down to the fundamentals. So, final question. As we look ahead, what's one shift that you'd hope to see in how organizations approach cybersecurity and compliance?
I think we need to be more discriminating on what's acceptable in establishing and communicating maturity, trust, assurance, whatever you think, or whatever term you want to use. Using mechanisms that have a great degree of variability and individual interpretation is not a good recipe. It's not going to produce positive outcomes. So focus on the things that are actually proven to work. And shameless plug for HITRUST, we have a less than 1% breach rate. It's been like that for 2 years since we started tracking these metrics. So just be more discriminating. I'm not saying get rid of all the other frameworks. I think there's a lot of merit in each one of them in their own right based on specific circumstances. But if you're working to build trust with a customer or stakeholder, the government, be more discriminating. So, okay, now selfish, biased, HITRUST hat coming off. I'd like to see that security and compliance gain a better seat at the table within the organization. I opened up saying that one of the things that excites me most is that we've made some headway. We need to do a better job of understanding the way the business operates, the way the business will be sustained and grow, and do a better job of translating how security and compliance actually support that mission.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Now you see smaller firms saying, do you have a named CISO? Do you have a security lead that's an in-house named full-time employee? But what I see is smaller firms saying, well, we have a CISO. What do you mean? Didn't they just take care of everything? We bought this person to make that problem go away. And I think that's a fundamental flaw as well, because in order to really solve those things, they need to be resource rich, at least a solid team, if not teams and tools and other things, right? So I think that's part of it is, like you said, and as we talk through this discussion, security is getting a seat at the table. And I think the business is starting to realize what it means when they do have an opinion, and it's now documented in the minute. And from a consumer of large vendor technology, I personally would like to see a lot more transparency in their bill of materials. That was a big push, a federal mandate for SBOMs. And when's the last time we bought technology that came with a bill of materials for every package that's in it? Almost never. And so we need to get back to that. We need to start, as consumers of this technology, we need to realize these vendors aren't running the show anymore. Like, we as purchasers are able to help, just like HITRUST gets enrichment from threat intel, we can help bring this feedback back to the vendor community and say, it's not good enough. Fundamentally, having the business not just buy in on the concept of security being involved, but what that actually means materially from a financial investment standpoint, and removing the security budget out from under IT and putting it equally with other budgets that are as important as that is a big piece. And then that transparency in the vendor space can help everybody start to curtail some of these other big issues that we've seen in the past.
Powerful stuff. Sounds like I've got a lot of homework to do, teaching my kids security and compliance and transparency so that they're prepared to sort of bring that to the table as they move into the business world. That's a lot. Gentlemen, it's been an absolute pleasure to have this conversation with you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Thanks, Jonathan. Thanks, Ryan.
What stood out in this conversation is how often progress in cybersecurity starts with humility, the willingness to admit that tools alone can't protect us. True security is about awareness, adaptability, and collaboration. It's about asking better questions of our systems, our teams, and ourselves. And when we do that, compliance stops being a burden and starts becoming proof that we're learning faster than the threats. My thanks to Sean and Ryan for joining me today, and for reminding us that cybersecurity goes beyond defending what we have. We need to be active in protecting what's next. Thanks for listening to Edge of IT. Please support the show by leaving a comment or subscribe on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen.